الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام الأتمان الأكملان على شفيع الأمة سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Dear brothers, honored brothers, respected brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. See, you know, when you come to Birmingham, you don't need to tell them to repeat the salam twice because first time is loud enough. The more south you go, the energy is a bit lower, but the more north you go, alhamdulillah, the energy is high. Brothers, jazakumullahu khairan for coming today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this effort from you and make it count even heavier because we are in the last 10 nights, last 10 days of this blessed month, Insha'Allah. Brothers, what I wanted to speak about today was now that we're in the month of Ramadan, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all of our ibadah thus far, our qiyam, our fasting, our cries for forgiveness due to our shortcomings. When we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask Him to better the situation of our ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of this. And most crucially, a dua I've been making recently, and I'm sure it's been on the tongues of all Muslims, may this be the last Ramadan where we do not face any more onslaught and bloodshed after this. May this be the last Ramadan where the Muslims must face humiliation due to the leaders selling them out. Now moving on to the topic of today, dear brothers, Insha'Allah, there's a powerful incident we've all heard. We've all heard this incident, I'm sure, once in our lifetime. But because I came over it recently, I had to mention this again. The Battle of Badr, to give some context, how did it begin? There was a caravan that was passing by in Medina, and the Muslims wanted to intercept this caravan. And what happened was the Muslims wanted to intercept this because these were the goods that they wanted to reclaim that were stolen from them in Mecca. Abu Sufyan at this time wasn't a Muslim. He heard that the Muslims now were going to run a raid on this caravan, so he sent word out to Mecca for reinforcements. So all together now, the two parties, the Muslims and the Quraysh, they meet near the well of Badr. They meet at the plain of Badr now. The famous number is 313 versus 1,000. They're outnumbered. So what happens is, the nature of how Islamic jihad used to take place in the beginning is you'd have duels. So you'd have the leaders or the strongest of the army of the Muslims versus the strongest of the other opposition. So Hamza radiallahu anh took place in the duel and he won, and then the battle then began. In this battle we had 14 shuhada. From them was the Umayr ibn Abi Waqas. He was only 15 years old, by the way, when he was martyred in the Battle of Badr. Like, I don't know, put your hand up, brothers, whoever's 15, younger than 15. 15 years old, he was martyred in the Battle of Badr only 2 years after Hijrah. The battle's going on, and you have prominent Sahaba in this battle. But you also have one staunch, nasty enemy of Rasulullah and Islam from Mecca, who was Abu Jahl. Now Abu Jahl, just to give you a picture of how nasty this man was, we all must have heard the story about the intestines of the camel dropped on the Prophet ﷺ, yeah? We must have come across that account. He was the one that did it. And Fatima radiallahu anha was the one that had to clean it from him. There was also a plot towards the end part of the Meccan da'wah, where the Prophet ﷺ was about to get assassinated. He was the one that fronted this campaign of assassinating the Prophet ﷺ. And the early torment that the Muslims were subjected to in the early days of them embracing Islam, it was all down to this nasty man, Abu Jahl. So during the battle now, everyone's fighting for victory. There are two boys who approach a prominent Sahabi, Abdurrahman ibn Auf. These two boys, both of their names are called Mu'adh. Both of their names are called Mu'adh. And they say to Abdurrahman ibn Auf in the battle, they're not worrying about any other enemy here. They're saying to Abdurrahman ibn Auf, there's a man called Abu Jahl, show me where he is. Show me where Abu Jahl is, because we heard it was this man that made Rasulullah's life most difficult, and he mocked Allah and His Messenger. Show us. Because wallahi, we will not leave this battlefield unless we die today or we finish him off. And I'm going to explain the ages of these two boys later. Abdurrahman ibn Auf points, there's your man. There's the target. This is the man that made the life of the Muslims in Mecca hell. And this is the man who made Rasulullah's life so miserable. So they go and they look for him and they strike him. And they strike him to a degree where on the battlefield it was as though he was dead. Like nobody went to kill him off afterwards. But there's one, subhanAllah, description in this story, brothers, about these two young men, which wallahi is mind-blowing. You know, when you look at UFC champions, you think that someone who's got a dislocated shoulder, he wins the fight. I think maybe you guys are too young, but there was a boxer, Muslim boxer known as Danny Williams. He won a fight, he had a dislocated shoulder, but he knocked out his opponent with the uppercut. That's just a dislocated shoulder. Danny Williams, when he won that fight, was in his 30s. One of these Mu'adh, during the battle, he was struck on his arm. He was struck on his arm, and the only thing that was holding his arm up was the flesh. So the bone's been cut through. The bone's been cut through now. It's just the flesh that is hanging off on his arm here. And because that harm now was an hindrance to him in the battle, do you know what he did? Just visualize this, brothers, yeah? His arm is dangling in a battle, yeah? There's no referee here to stop the fight. He could have got killed. He stepped on his dangling arm and he ripped it off. He stepped on his dangling arm, whatever flesh that was there, he stepped on it and he ripped it off. One of them had one arm, the other one had two. They went for Abu Jahl and they wiped him out, but he hadn't yet died yet. But when they struck him, it's as though he died. Look at the love, brothers. Look at the love of these two Mu'adh that wanted to defend the Prophet ﷺ. Look at the determination. Look at the ghira, the protective jealousy they had of our Nabi Muhammad ﷺ. Look at the love they had for Islam's honor and status as a deen. You know, if I was to tell you, brothers, these two Mu'adh were aged 13 and 15 years old. 13 and 15 years old. With all due respect to them, mashallah, when we see Muslims that are taking part in combat sport, it's good we hail them to such a rank. Which one of them has lost an arm, stepped on it, and defended the name of the Prophet ﷺ by eliminating the most staunchest of enemies known to Islam at the time? 13 and 15 years old. But it didn't end there. It didn't end there. Now, towards the end of the battle, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, again someone who was mocked in Mecca for reciting the Quran, and someone who was beaten for reciting the Quran openly, he saw Abu Jahl was still alive, but he's barely alive. But he still has his soul inside him. So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud walks towards him to finish off the job, to kill off Abu Jahl. And as he's about to go to Abu Jahl, and this, by the way, brothers, is a sunnah of all tyrants. Even when they're dying, they don't want to let go of their arrogance and pride. But it's no problem, because they're going to meet someone else on the other side, known as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give them what they deserve for what they did. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud walks towards him, and he says, with his dying breaths, he says, لِمَنِ الْغَلَبَةُ الْيَوْمِ. Now, who's the victory for today? He's on the floor, man. You're going to die, you're on the floor. لِمَنِ الْغَلَبَةُ الْيَوْمِ. Who does the victory belong to today? And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ يَا عَدُوَ اللَّهِ. Victory today is for Allah and His Messenger, O enemy of Allah. And then he says to him, لَقَدْ ارْتَقَيْتَ مَنْصِبًا مُرْتَقِيًا. You have basically now taken today a high position. Ya Ruway'i al-Ghanam. Because Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he was someone who was of weak status in Mecca. So Abu Jahl said to him, today you have taken a lofty position. Yeah? O little shepherd of the sheep. Because that's what they used to refer to him as in Mecca. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud's final words to him was, Alhamdulillahi alladhi akhzaka al-yawm. Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has disgraced you today and humiliated you. And he struck him in his head and Abu Jahl passed away. But subhanallah, you see here, brothers, when he was filled with arrogance and pride, look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ended this man's life after all the torment he did to Prophet ﷺ and the early Muslims. His death wasn't on the hands of Hamza, the lion of Allah. His death wasn't upon the hands of Umar radiallahu anh. His death was upon the hands of two boys, 13 and 15 years old, and one of them only has one arm. One of them only has one arm. Do you see? And subhanallah, I just want to go on to mention to further some more points. You know, brothers, for the youth to carry the message of Islam, Wallahi al-Azim, it's nothing new to the legacy of Islam. And I'm going to narrate a few people from our legacy. Usamah ibn Zayd, the Prophet ﷺ himself appointed him as a general of an army at 16, 17 years old. Muhammad al-Fatih, the one who conquered Constantinople, where the Prophet ﷺ said this as a prophecy, he fulfilled it, was 21 years old. Muhammad al-Qasim, all of us today, well, majority of us today are from the Asian subcontinent. He liberated Sindh, which is known as current-day Pakistan, at 17 years old. You must have heard of Tariq bin Ziyad. A lot of, mashallah, youth have it in their bios today. You know, David Goggins, he says, who's going to carry the boats? Tariq bin Ziyad said, burn the boats. Yeah, he said, burn the boats. At 27 years old, when he reached Spain, he conquered Andalus. He said, burn the boats, meaning we don't want any retreat today. We're either going to die here to propagate Islam or we're going to win. And they conquered Andalus, and as a result of that, Islam remained in Spain for 700 years. And that was before. But dear brothers, even if we look very close to now, there are still greats who are still young. And I'll give you just a few examples. You have a man or a young boy, again 14, 15 years old. His name was Faris al-Auda. You must have seen a very famous picture of a boy standing in front of an Israeli tank with a rock. You must have seen this picture, yeah? 15 years old. It's nothing new to the legacy of Islam to have people who are young in age, but so mature and so great in their love and passion for the deen. And then subhanallah, Sha'ban al-Dalu, he's someone who passed away about 2 years ago, under 2 years. What happened with Sha'ban al-Dalu, you must have seen when the airstrike took place in Gaza, he passed away, but whilst being burnt alive. But what did he pass away on at 19 or 20 years old? He raised his finger whilst he's being burnt alive and he's saying, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. All of these people I've narrated to you, dear brothers, from the old and the current, have been between the ages of roughly 26 to 13 years old. Islam stood on their backs. The spine of Islam and carrying Islam and the spine of propagating the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was done on the backs of who, dear brothers? The youth. It was done on the youth. And now, I want to make a point about the brothers today, Insha'Allah. You hear this narrative that exists, even sometimes in the field of da'wah, the youth are done out. The youth are finished. The youth are lost cause. The youth are done. You know, subhanallah, I totally disagree with this statement. And I'll tell you why I disagree with this statement. When it came to battling the narrative and the propaganda machine, who done that of the Zionist entity? It was the youth that done that. They had no state backing. They had no leader. They had no millions. They had no fancy studios. It required one thing and one thing only that made them change a global narrative and expose the lies of a superpower, that was a superpower, America, funding the Zionist occupation. It was only one thing that they needed and one thing that they showed: their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His Messenger and the Ummah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The rest was simple, be it by mobile phone, be it by camera, be it by a march, be it by a protest. The ingredient that the youth had was the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. Was that not the case? Or was it something else? You know, the majority of the UK, of the Muslim population, is made up of Asians. We have nothing to do with the Palestinians when it comes to our nationality. They're Palestinians, we're Pakistani Bengalis. We're Yemenis. When it comes to them being Arabs, we're Asians. So what was it then that made us go and stand up and defeat this narrative that took place and call for the rights of them? It was only Islam. It was only Islam. So it shows that the youth were the ones who debunked this. There's goodness in the hearts of the youth. And there's goodness in the hearts of the brothers that are here today. That there's goodness that I'm looking at today. And why do I say this for? When it comes to, subhanallah, our mother who's locked up, and we can't forget her, one of the heroes and champions of today, Afia Siddiqui. How many years has she been locked up? Every time you hear of a campaign that's going forward for Afia Siddiqui, who jumps on the back of this campaign? Majority of them. It's the youth. It's the youth. And now on an individual level, when you look at Ramadan, all of us have weaknesses and struggles. You're telling me, dear brothers, let's be honest and frank here. Despite the girls, the drugs, the weaknesses, the bad company, the sins we do, the people we speak to, some of the social circles we may not be in, when Ramadan comes, you're telling me when you're standing in front of Allah, you don't try to lock all of this off. Of course we do. What is that an indication of, brothers? That's the indication of presence of Iman in your heart. That even though 120 years have passed and no one represents Islam on a land scale, no one represents Islam on a governance scale, and we're affected by some ills of society, even when Ramadan comes, our heart just attaches itself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is this, brothers, if not goodness? What is this if not showing that your loyalty ultimately, even after all of the wrong we may do, your loyalty at the end of the day lies with who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbul Alameen. Do you see? Yeah? And there's one point, dear brothers, I want to end on here, inshallah. The Prophet ﷺ says in a beautiful hadith, he says, وَدِدْتُ أَنِّي لَقِيتُ إِخْوَانِي. I wish I could meet my brothers one day. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, because they loved the Prophet ﷺ so much, they said, أَوَلَيْسَ نَحْنُ إِخْوَانَكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Oh Rasulullah, are we not your brothers that you're speaking about? And he says, لَا أَنْتُمْ أَصْحَابِي. No, you are my companions. وَلَكِنْ إِخْوَانِيَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِي وَلَمْ يَرَوْنِي. This statement of the Prophet ﷺ refers to every single one of us in this room. He says, no, my brothers are those who didn't see me, but they're going to believe in me. And this is who the Prophet ﷺ is referring to today, in this room today. Do you see? So what I'd like to end on, dear brothers, after all of what I've covered today, in this brief reminder, make a pledge with yourself, a promise to yourself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables you with the ability to liberate the ummah from the injustice and oppression she faces. And I'll tell you, if a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, and let me be honest, before this battle took place, we didn't hear of these two boys. In fact, the narration of these two boys isn't even mentioned after. It was just in that very small space of them dealing with Abu Jahl. We didn't hear of them before. We didn't hear of them after. But when their time came to shine, they made sure that they were shining, and their names are etched in history for destroying Islam's staunchest enemy. So make a pledge between yourself in these last nights of Ramadan, these blessed days of Ramadan. Oh Allah, make me of that person who changes the course of this ummah from humiliation to glory, from disgrace to victory, and bi'idhnillahi ta'ala from a very vulnerable situation to the most powerful ummah, so we can guide all of mankind to the light bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We shouldn't be spectators. And because all of us have, maybe a lot of us follow MMA, I just want to give you one example. How not to be a spectator, be an influencer. You know, many years ago, I think in 2011, 2012, Conor McGregor was known for this knockout highlight reel, where he knocked out Jose Aldo with one punch. It was a counter left. In that crowd, there was Khabib. Khabib was watching on when Conor McGregor did this. You see, in that crowd, there were thousands of people. There were thousands of people in that crowd. 5-6 years later, who laid the worst beating on Conor McGregor? Khabib was in that crowd. He had it in his mind, I'm going to defeat this man. And Khabib went from a spectator, a viewer, to one of the best champions known to the UFC. And I'll go another step further for those of the brothers who like boxing. Usyk, before he was even heavyweight, he watched on Dylan White versus Anthony Joshua. He's sitting there with his hood. He's sitting in the crowd with his hood. Wembley Arena, thousands are there. He's not even a heavyweight at the time. In his mind, he's saying, one day I'm going to be heavyweight champion of the world. From this day, I'm going to work towards that. Undisputed dominated the whole cruiserweight division. Who then beat Anthony Joshua twice? Once in Tottenham, then in Saudi. And then who went on to beat Tyson Fury, and who's now the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world? In other words, you may see yourself as a tiny spectacle amongst many thousands and millions of spectators. But wallahi, brothers, there's two things you need. Uqsim billah, there's two things you need. And the Prophet ﷺ has shown this, Islam has shown this. You need Allah by your side, and you just need hard grit and determination. These two ingredients in a heart, wallahi, you could change the world one man. Any person here. And it gives me goosebumps saying it because it's possible. Any one of these brothers in the room today can be the one man that changes the course of history And you can have your name etched next to Salahudeen Al Ayubi and Umar radiallahu anhu. You just need those two things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on your side, and hard work, grit and determination to put the glory of this ummah back on the map, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.